What's going on, everybody? Today we're talking about the 2018 Ecoboost Mustang today. So as of today, I've owned the car for almost about 2 months now, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what it's been like to own this car for the time allotted, and whether you should probably buy an Ecoboost Mustang if you're in the market for one, and whether it should be a 2018 or not. Let's first begin by talking about this Ecoboost Mustang in particular compared to other ones. So what's the difference between this Mustang compared to the other Mustangs that are available to purchase from the dealer? Well, first off, this is the base Ecoboost Mustang. This Mustang comes with the standard 17-inch alloy wheels, the standard radio unit, standard everything. It's just the base model. So why this Ecoboost Mustang in particular, or the base model Ecoboost Mustang essentially, compared to the other upgraded options available? Well, first and foremost, I plan on modifying the vehicle, and of course, because it was the cheapest option available. I plan to make the car a kind of hybrid, I guess, essentially, between a daily driven car and a track car. So the hopes for this car is to, modify it to get more power out of it, but also modify it in such a way where it handles a lot more nicely in terms of driving spiritedly. Now, don't get me wrong, this car already handles really good as it is from the factory, even this base model, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But first, now that we understand the background of the car and what it kind of has in terms of options that are available, so there's a few things that I want to talk about in terms of the Ecoboost Mustang, especially this base model. So what do you get in terms of the interior? Well, in the base, you get, your cloth seats, your bucket seats, which are actually kind of nice. They're actually very comfortable. From the previous years as well, you also get the same instrument gauge panel, or the dash, essentially. You get the same one. So you have your two ring, bezels, where you have your tachometer on your left side, your speedometer on your right side. I think it's kind of the same thing for the new digitized dash that was released for the premium Ecoboost Mustangs and the GTs. So, but the difference is that this whole dash is in digital. So you keep the same dash from the previous year Mustangs and maybe even the previous generations, or something similar to the previous generation Mustangs. But it's simple, and of course it works. So, there's, are you really missing out on the digital dash? Maybe, but, yes, it adds to the aesthetics of the car, but does it really make the car that much better? Probably not. With the 2018 Ecoboost Mustang, I think the telescoping ability of the steering wheel was now introduced, so you can now move the steering wheel out and in instead of just up and down, which allows you to refine the steering wheel position and the seat position to a point where it can be suited to your proportions and really be a comfortable driving experience. Now let's talk about the stock radio unit in this car. So I think this also comes from the previous year Mustangs, as well as maybe even the previous generation Mustangs. I'm not too sure. I haven't really looked into it, but the reason I think that this radio unit comes from the previous generations as well is because it has a number pad on the right side of the display of the radio unit. And to me, that's kind of useless, and it's kind of funny, and it's a bit retro at the same time, because it kind of gives you an early 2000s feel, because it has a number pad, and a number pad to me in 2018 is completely useless, because I don't remember anybody's number off the top of my memory except for maybe my mom's phone number. Maybe I could probably count the number of numbers for people that I remember off the top of my head on one hand. I don't bother remembering anybody's phone numbers. There's just way too many contacts in my phone to remember that for me it would just be a waste of time to try to remember all those people's number. So that's really the only, unique thing about the radio unit, is that number pad, which, like I said, kind of gives a retro feeling. But in terms of functionality, you have Bluetooth still, so you can use your phone and whatever media guess if that's how you describe it, you know, on the car just as fine as you would in terms of the upgraded radio unit. So of course with the upgraded radio unit you get navigation, and if that's something that you need and is, you know, really beneficial and you can justify the upgraded cost of getting navigation in the radio unit, and go right ahead. But your phone comes with navigation, so for me the navigation unit is just a luxury and it's not really a necessity, so upgrading to it for me was just kind of pointless. Let's talk a little bit about the back seat and the trunk. So the back seat, as has been mentioned by a lot of other people, is really small. People like my grandmother who are smaller and thinner can fit back there nicely, as well as kids. Yes, a back seat can fit back there, but I don't know how difficult or easy it will be to remove a car seat from this car if it's your daily driver every single day. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's something maybe to try if you're going to buy this car. Try that first from the dealership, see what it's like to remove the car seat, and see if it's going to be easy for you, or if you're going to be willing to deal with that hassle of removing the car seat every single day and every single time you drive. But for a compromise in terms of having a small back seat, you do have a huge trunk, which is nice. And you can also lower the rear seat, so that gives you more space in terms of utilizing the back. So if you need to travel in this car to a different city or state for, you know, a certain time, let's say about a week or something, you know, you can definitely do that in this car with another person. So you can basically travel for two in this car comfortably, and carry enough luggage so that you can have enough to wear or whatever it is that you're taking for the time that you need to spend in that other city or state or whatever, wherever it is that you're going. So traveling in this car is very, very possible. So if you haven't noticed, this car is a manual transmission, so it has a 6-speed. The clutch pedal is pretty soft. It's not very hard. I've heard a lot of iffy things about the previous generation Mustangs in terms of the clutch pedal, and it was just almost finicky, and maybe switching gears was a little finicky. But now, I mean, this kind of reminds me of my 2013 Ecoboost. Sorry, this reminds me of my 2013 Scion FRS that I used to drive. The clutch pedal is super soft, and the gearbox or switching gears is very notchy. So I know a lot of people who have a personal preference don't like notchiness essentially in a transmission. I do personally. I like feeling when the shifter is in gear, and I just like, I guess, feeling the notchiness of the transmission or the gears when you're shifting. So yeah, the clutch pedal is nice. It's soft. So what's it been like driving this car around town and on the highway? So the car is very comfortable. You know, there's not very many things to complain about. Even though this car is a manual transmission, driving it around town or being stuck in traffic is not something to really complain about. I mean, it always sucks being stuck in traffic, but the car is never something to really complain about, you know, in terms of driving a manual transmission, especially for this Ecoboost Mustang. Driving around town, same thing. I really do like driving this car, to be honest. I mean, you know, it looks nice. At first, when I saw these cars in like pictures and stuff, I was a little bit iffy about them because the front end just looked kind of, you know, it looked weird and it didn't look like a Mustang anymore. Then I saw them at the dealership, and I was just kind of, you know, in awe at how cool they look. And so they look really cool, and also, you know, you get the 2.3 liter turbocharged engine, so it's always cool to hear that turbo spool up. That's always nice to have. Now, unfortunately, if you don't know by now, I think it's called an electronic blow-off valve. So the boost that the car builds up doesn't vent atmospherically, so you don't get that blow-off valve noise that is so popular on, you know, on other modified 4-cylinder turbocharged applications. You don't get that blow-off valve sound. Now you can upgrade to a blow-off valve that does vent atmospherically and get that sound, but you know, that doesn't come with the car. But you do still get that turbo spool, so that's always cool. Let's talk a little bit now about the performance of this car. So I won't get too much into the specs of everything because you probably already know them. But this car really is, it's quick. It's not fast by any means. But again, this car probably wasn't built to be fast. If you want a car that is fast, you should go for the GT. Now, this car is not a GT by any means. But what I like about the Ecoboost Mustang is that, before we get into that, let me just kind of talk about this. Or let me just say this first. In terms of the previous generation Mustangs, where the V6 was the option below the GT or the V8, it always felt to me like the V6 was trying to keep up with the GT. So it's like the GT was paving this path, right, for the Mustang, and the V6 was just always right behind it, trying to follow it, trying to be it, and it just never was it. And the platform, in terms of the aftermarket community for the V6, was just never there. No one really cared about the V6 unless you really did something crazy to it. So the whole modifying aspect of a V6 really had to be custom, at least in my opinion, because comparing the platform for the V6 Mustang compared to, you know, the GT and other platforms out there for aftermarket tuning in terms of other cars, you know, the V6, it just never was there compared to all those other tuning applications. But the Ecoboost Mustang, the platform is really blowing up to something else. So, like I said, it always seemed like the V6 was trying to keep up with the GT. But the Ecoboost Mustang doesn't seem like that anymore. The Ecoboost Mustang, in terms of, I guess, an analogy, has essentially branched off from trying to follow the GT and is now paving its own path. It sits in a different realm, essentially, in terms of the overall car itself. Yes, it's still a Mustang. Yes, it looks very similar to the GT. But the fact that it has a 2.3-liter turbocharged engine in it now makes it sit in a different realm. And the whole tuning aspect and aftermarket platform for this car is blowing up in a different way that the V6 Mustang never did. So now, you know, again, to speak analogously, comparing the V6 Mustang to the GT was like comparing an apple to an apple, but the V6 Mustang apple, or the apple that represented the V6 Mustang, was just never tasted as good. But now, comparing the Ecoboost Mustang to the GT is almost like comparing apples to oranges. It's a completely different car with the 2.3-liter turbocharged engine in it, which is cool because this is a whole different platform in itself, and jumping into an Ecoboost as opposed to jumping into a GT Mustang leaves you, or doesn't leave you, with that kind of like dissatisfying taste where when you realize the potential that the GT had and you have a V6, it almost makes you, you know, think like, dang, I should have gotten a GT instead. Whereas the Ecoboost Mustang doesn't really give you that feeling. It's, you know, a GT will always be a GT. It will always be a cool car in itself, and it will always be like, damn, you know, that GT is awesome. But the Ecoboost Mustang will never make you feel like, damn, I should have gotten a GT instead. Because this Ecoboost Mustang performs and is really cool in itself. And so that's what's really cool about the Mustangs now, is that you don't have to feel kind of, I guess, ashamed, for lack of a better word, for buying a V6 Mustang and not buying a GT. Now, buying an Ecoboost Mustang is, to me, is cool in itself. And that might be a little biased because I bought an Ecoboost Mustang as opposed to a GT. But of course, you know, the GTs are super cool, and they're only getting faster, and they're only getting better. So, you know, really now, when it comes to buying a Mustang, whether you should buy the Ecoboost or whether you should buy the GT is a question that you should need to weigh out for yourself. So let's talk a little bit about why like I said, I bought this Ecoboost Mustang. So the reason I bought the Ecoboost Mustang was, of course, because it was the cheapest option to buy. And I did a little bit of research into this car, and I said, okay, I'm going to buy it. Because And the real main reason that I wanted to go for there's a bird in the road there. The main reason that I wanted to go for the base model was because it's like a blank canvas. You know, you start off with basically nothing, and hopefully one day build it into something that you only dream, that you have essentially dreamed of, I guess. And that's why I bought the base model EcoBoost Mustang, is because it's just a blank canvas. If you want to upgrade something, upgrade it to what you want to upgrade it to, as opposed to like the EcoBoost Mustang with the Magna-Ride suspension. At what point do you now get to upgrade the Magna-Ride suspension? I feel like an EcoBoost Mustang that comes with the Magna-Ride suspension and other upgraded things isn't an EcoBoost Mustang that you want to buy to upgrade. It's an EcoBoost Mustang that you want to buy so that it's already refined, so that you don't have to upgrade it. And for me, trying to justify buying a EcoBoost Mustang that, you know, costs well above a base GT and already had upgraded, you know, suspension like Magna-Ride, well, it's kind of like, well, why would you want to take that apart? Because it's something that's really cool and it already beefs up the suspension tremendously. But this car, it's just all stock, and beefing up the suspension will just be a matter of what you want for the car. Do you want it to be a drag car? Do you want it to be a track car? Do you want it to be a drift car? You know, these are all options that you can weigh out for yourself and really understand what you want the car to be. So we're gonna end the video here for right now. Maybe later I'll have some more to talk about, but for now, let's go ahead and just end it.